Hello, true crime fans. Welcome to Debate the News True Crime Edition. I'm Joseph Lobosco, joined by my amazing co-host Adrienne Barker. Tonight we delve into a harrowing case that shocked the nation, the Watts family disappearance. But first, a quick disclaimer. This episode discusses domestic violence, violence against children, and murder, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse, help may be available at the Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988, or you can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. Adrienne and I are not attorneys, law enforcement, or forensic experts. While we research every case thoroughly, this show is recorded live with little to no editing. Any factual inaccuracies are unintentional. And as always, any individuals mentioned who have not been convicted of a crime are presumed innocent until proven guilty. The opinions of our guests and audience members are their own and don't necessarily represent the views of myself, Adrienne, or Debate the News. In August 2018, a seemingly loving Colorado father, Chris Watts, killed his pregnant wife and two young daughters in cold blood.
Tonight, we aim to honor the memories of Shanann Watts and her children, Bella, 4, Celeste, 3, and the unborn baby, Nico. It's a case almost too heartbreaking to fathom. A pregnant mother and two little girls who should have been safe in their home, betrayed by the person they trusted most. And from the outside, the Watts family looked happy. Shanann was glowing in Facebook posts about her life and marriage. But behind the closed doors, the cracks were forming. Tonight, we're going to focus on verified facts, court records, and investigative findings to piece together how this tragedy unfolds. We'll walk you through a detailed timeline of events from the days leading up to Shannon's disappearance through the shocking confession and conviction of Chris Watts, and then discuss the lingering questions and lessons from this case. This is Debate the News True Crime.
June 2018, Shanann, 34, surprises Chris, 33, with happy news. She's pregnant with their third child, a boy they plan to name Nico. Shanann's posts an affectionate Father's Day message to Chris on Facebook, praising him as, quote, the reason I was brave enough to agree to number 3, end quote. But even as Shanann expresses her journey, trouble is brewing. That same month, Chris secretly begins an affair with a 30-year-old coworker, Nicole Kessinger. He tells Kessinger that he and his wife are separating, which was untrue, and starts seeing her frequently. By early July, the relationship turns physical. Over the summer of 2018, Shanann senses Chris growing distant. In July, Shanann and the girl spend 5 weeks in North Carolina visiting her family, while Chris stays behind for work. Shanann texts friends that Chris has become cold and that she's worried about their marriage. Family friends later recall Shanann desperately tried to save their relationship as Chris pulled away. Shanann returns to Colorado in early August, determined to mend their marriage.
Shanann is on a business trip to Arizona. I remember exactly the company she was working for her job with a lifestyle company. And that evening, she texts a friend that Chris had seemed oddly cool towards her when they spoke. Still, nothing prepares anyone for what's to come. And just before midnight on August 12th, it was a Sunday, 2018, her flight home is delayed, so she doesn't arrive back until the early hours of the next day.
Monday, August 13th, 2018 at 1:48 a.m. Shanann's close friend Nicole Atkinson drops her off at the Watts family house after giving her a ride home from the airport. It's the last time Shanann is seen alive by anyone outside of her household. Chris later claims he and Shanann briefly spoke after she got home. What we know for certain is that something horrible happened during those pre-dawn hours. According to Chris's later confession, he woke Shanann that morning to discuss separating and to discuss his affair. An argument ensued. Despite Shanann being 15 weeks pregnant with their son, Nico, Chris strangled her to death in their bedroom. Heartbreakingly, their daughter Bella, just 4 years old, walked in during the aftermath and asked, "What's wrong with mommy?" Chris told Bella that Shanann was sick. He then wrapped Shanann's body in a sheet and loaded it into the back of his pickup truck. Shockingly, he also put Bella and 3-year-old Celeste, still alive and unaware of what was happening, into that truck as well. 5 a.m. to 6:30 a.m. Neighbor's security camera later showed Chris's work truck backing into the driveway in the early morning hours. Chris departs the house, ostensibly to head to a job site. In reality, he's carrying out a gruesome cover up. He drives about 45 minutes to an oil field owned by his employer. There, in a final act of horror, Chris smothers his two little girls, one after another, suffocating Celeste and then Bella with a blanket. He disposes of their bodies in the most callous way possible, dropping each child through an 8-inch hatch at the top of separate crude oil storage tanks. He also buries Shanann's body in a shallow pit nearby the worksite. Later, investigators note the harrowing details. For instance, Bella had scratches and even clumps of hair stuck to the hatch, evidence of the struggle and the tight fit. It's difficult to even hear these details, but they underscore the brutality of Chris's actions. After hiding his family's bodies, Chris texts his superior and coworkers, oddly mentioning that he'll be at the remote worksite alone that day. He then goes about his work morning as if nothing happened.
Late morning in August 13, back in Frederick, Colorado. No one, by the way, knows about the murders yet, except for Chris. Shanann had a prenatal checkup scheduled that morning, which she failed to show up for. And by 12 p.m., her good friend Nicole Atkinson grows extremely concerned. Shanann isn't answering any calls or texts. Highly unusual, by the way, since Shanann was very responsible and punctual. Nicole knows Shanann is 15 weeks pregnant and had been feeling ill the day before. She drives to the Watts house around midday and she sees Shannon's car in the garage with the children's car seats still inside, but no answer at the door. And unable to find her friend, Nicole calls Chris, who is at work, and also she notifies the local police to request a welfare check at the Watts home. At 1:40 p.m., a Frederick police officer arrives to check on the family. Chris hurriedly comes home from work to meet the officer, and inside they find disturbing signs. Shannon's purse, containing her phone, her keys, and her medication, is on the kitchen counter. Her wedding ring is found on the master bed nightstand. The family dog is unharmed, but Shanann and the children are nowhere to be found. Importantly, Shannon's cell phone is discovered still switched off. This is entirely out of character. Shanann lived on her phone, especially due to her work in social media sales. At this point, with a pregnant mother, two toddlers missing under suspicious circumstances, police escalate the situation. And by late afternoon, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, CBI, and FBI are called to assist.
Evening, August 13th. Chris tells officers and friends that he has no idea what happened. He claims he last saw Shanann at about 5:15 a.m., the morning when he left for work. He speculates to police that maybe Shanann took the girls to a friend's house for a play date and hadn't returned. However, the story is vague and immediately suspicious. Shannon's close friends know she wouldn't just vanish without telling anyone. Nevertheless, that first day, Chris tries to play the part of a worried husband. He even reaches out to some of Shannon's friends, asking if they've seen her. Meanwhile, local law enforcement and neighbors begin searching the area. Missing person flyers are printed that same day with Shanann, Bella, and Celeste photos.
August 14, 2018. The case quickly becomes public. The CBI issues an endangered missing alert for Shanann and the children, and local news stations descend on the story. Chris agrees to speak on camera, an interview that will become infamous. And standing on his front porch, wearing a sleeveless shirt, shifting uncomfortably, he pleads for his family's safe return. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back. If somebody has her, please bring her back. I need to see everybody. This house is not complete without everybody here. He looks directly into the camera as he says that. And at first glance, his words sound concerned, but there's something that's off. And observers later note that Chris's effect is strangely flat. He doesn't shed a tear, and at times, he even folds his arms, appearing more nervous than heartbroken. In fact, a neighbor quietly tells police that Chris's demeanor is not right. He's normally quiet, yet now he's overly talkative and agitated. The community is rallying to help find Shannon and the girls, but suspicion is already centering on Chris. August 15th, 2018, investigators make a critical move. They ask Chris to come in for a polygraph test. By now, his inconsistent stories and his odd behavior, it definitely raised red flags. And Chris fails the polygraph miserably. And confronted with the test results, Chris breaks, but only partially. In the interrogation room that night, he confesses to his father first and then to detectives that he killed Shanann. However, in his initial confession, Chris tells a lie to try to mitigate his action. He claims, oh, so hard to read, that Shanann strangled the girls after he asked for a separation and that he killed Shanann in a rage upon discovering that supposed act. It's a self stirring story, painting himself as a grieving father who lashed out. Investigators are skeptical, but any scenario confirms that Chris is responsible for at least Shannon's death. And that night, armed with Chris's partial confession, police arrest Chris Watts for the murder of his wife and possibly his children. Importantly, Chris had finally told them where the bodies were, and he indicates on a map the location: a remote Antarctica oil site called Survey 319, where he had been that Monday morning.
August 16, 2018. In the early hours of Thursday, investigators swarm the oil field identified by Chris. There, they make a grim discovery. Shannon's body is found in a shallow grave, and nearby, the bodies of Bella and Celeste are located submerged in crude oil inside two large oil tanks. It's now painfully clear that all three have been murdered. Meanwhile, details about Chris's double life emerge. Nicole Kessinger, the mistress, comes forward to investigators. She's been cooperating since August 15th, when she first heard about Shannon's disappearance on the news. Feeling betrayed and horrified, Kessinger gives a statement to police. She says she sensed something was wrong with Chris and famously remarked, quote, "I legitimately think his cheese was sliding off of his cracker long before he met me," end quote. A colorful way to say she believes Chris was unstable. August 21st, 2018, only 1 week after his televised plea for the return, Chris Watts is formally charged in court. Prosecutors in Weld County filed 9 charges against him: 5 counts of first-degree murder, 1 for Shanann, plus 2 additional counts under Colorado's law for murdering a child under 12 while in a position of trust, 1 count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy for baby Nico, and 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. If convicted at trial, Chris could face the death penalty. He remains held without bond. Around that time, Shannon's devastated family travels from North Carolina to Colorado to retrieve their loved one's remains and to attend court hearings. The public shock turns to outrage as the horrific facts become known.
September 1st, 2018. A funeral is held for Shanann, Bella, and Celeste in Shannon's hometown in North Carolina. It's an emotional, well attended service. Shannon's father and brother eulogize her and the girls. And in a touching statement read by the priest, Shannon's father, Frank Rozak, calls his daughter nothing but pure love and says to her, "You will always be daddy's little girl." Notably, throughout the 90-minute ceremony, Chris's name is never mentioned once. Good. He had been entirely disowned by the family that once embraced him as a son in law. And as the Ruzick family lays their daughter and granddaughters to rest, they also prepare for a long battle to bring their killer to justice. And November 6, 2018, Chris Watts was due to stand trial for capital murder, but in a dramatic turn, he instead pleads guilty to all charges. This plea deal is arranged in consultation with Shannon's family. They specifically request that the death penalty be taken off the table, as they do not wish for any further loss of life. And in exchange for the prosecution not seeking execution, Chris waives his right to trial and he admits the guilt to the murders of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and unborn Nico. And as part of his plea, Chris finally acknowledges that he alone killed the children.
November 19, 2018. In a packed courtroom, Chris Watts is sentenced. Judge Marcelo Capcal speaks at length, denouncing Chris for the brutality of his crimes. The judge calls the murders, quote, perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime I have handled out of the thousands of cases that I've seen, end quote. He notes the particularly heinous betrayal of a father figure killing his children. The court then hands down the punishment: 5 life sentences with no possibility of parole. In addition, Chris receives 48 years for the unlawful termination of Shannon's pregnancy and 36 years for 3 counts of tampering with the bodies. Essentially, he'll be spending the rest of his natural life plus 84 years in prison. Shannon's parents and brother give emotional statements. They describe their grief and anger, but also the love they will always have for Shanann and the girls. Chris, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, is then led away to begin his life behind bars.
February of 2019. While Watts is now a convicted murderer, investigators still seek the full truth. FBI and CBI agents interview Chris in prison to finally get a complete account of the murders. And in a shocking 5-hour confession, Chris at last admits everything. Shanann never hurt the children. He was the one that killed all 4 of his family members himself. He describes the crime in detail, which are even more cold blooded than when he initially claimed. And he says after he strangled Shanann, Bella came into the room and asked, "Is mommy okay?" And he told Bella that mommy wasn't feeling good. And he drove the girls alive with their mother's body to the oil site. And there, as we detailed, he smothered each girl with her blanket. And in this interview, Chris said he was not in his right mind, describing his own actions as the epitome of being angry, the epitome of losing your mind. And chillingly, he recalls that little Bella, witnessing her sister's murder, asked him, "Are you going to do the same thing to me as you did to Cece?" Sorry. Even as a frightened toddler, Bella showed remarkable courage. And Chris says Bella tried to fight back as he suffocated her. These revelations are almost too awful to contemplate, too hard to even speak about, but they put to rest any lingering doubts about what happened that morning. And Chris also admits that he had contemplated suicide after the murders, but he didn't go through it. Psychologists later note that it's somewhat unusual. Many family murderers do kill themselves, and it suggests Chris thought he might somehow get away with it or start a new life. But let's talk about the aftermath. In the wake of Chris's conviction, Shannon's family successfully filed a wrong death lawsuit against him, and in 2019, a judge ordered Chris Watts to pay them $6 million in damages. It's largely a symbolic judgment. I mean, it's meant to ensure he can never profit from his story. And Chris was transferred out of Colorado for his own safety, and he's now serving his life sentence in a Wisconsin prison in protective custody. And the Watts family home in Frederick went into foreclosure and for years remained unsold. A grim reminder of what took place there. And the case continues to reverberate in popular culture. And as Joseph mentioned, a 2020 Netflix documentary used Shannon's own social media, her texts, and police footage to chronicle the family story. And many who watched it are haunted by how normal and even loving the Watts appeared in home videos. Proof that we sometimes never truly know what's happening in someone else's household.
Thank you, Adrienne. Yeah, this story is horrible and it's really tough to go through, so thank you. That concludes the timeline for this tragic case. From the first signs of marital trouble to the heartbreaking murders and the swift justice that followed, we've covered how Chris Watts went from seemingly devoted family man to convicted killer. Now, let's discuss some of the broader questions this case raises. So, I first want to speak to the motive and mindset. What drives a seemingly normal husband and father to murder his entire family? It's such a senseless act, but Chris Watts had no known history of violence, no arrest record. Do you believe his claim that he just snapped due to anger and the desire for a new life, or do you think there were deeper psychological issues at play? Feel free to unmic and weigh in.
And I just want to share that we are on Chatter Social. So if you're listening to the podcast, please download the Chatter Social app and come on in. You could be in the audience and you can contribute to the conversation. I'm gonna go first then. This story touched my heart. I remember exactly where I was. Shannon was a beautiful, beautiful woman. She was working for a healthcare company. Her social media, I went through it, I think, like, as much as I could go back in her time to just see what I would see, and everything really did look like she was so beautiful. And I mean, one of those women that is so beautiful that you actually would say to yourself, "Oh my God, you're so lucky to be married to her." Like, that's how I felt. The girls were so beautiful. And then Chris, I really felt like I saw a monster and evil. So did he snap? I really do believe that these things are already inside of you. Was it another woman? I can't even understand that. The whole thing is so surprising to me, but I guess at the end of the day, I would say that people that try to appear normal but are monsters inside are the Chris Wattses of the world. Someone else. Go ahead, Debbie.
Yeah, I think for me, yes, while I believe it is something that you have inside of you, I do believe that his motive was that he had got involved with this other woman and he wanted to experience life on the other side. And he felt that, having this family, he couldn't do that. And when faced with it, he thought it would be easier for him to basically dispose of them rather than just walk away, and I just can't imagine what was going through his mind. I mean, y just get divorced then and move on. There's no reason to, but it's almost like he wanted a clean start, like a fresh break. It just y it just it's just heartbreaking.
Debbie, a lot of good points in there. I agree. We'll go to Mariana and then we'll address that a little bit more. Mariana?
Thank you guys and hi everyone. I have to agree with Debbie on this one. What was shocking to me when if you guys watch the video that she recorded when she discovered that she was expecting a third baby. He looks excited, but not as excited as you think a guy will be if you tell him you're expecting their baby, right? So he's like, "Oh yeah, we did it again. That's awesome." And he kissed her, but you can just feel that he's not 100% there, Like, it felt fake. His happiness felt fake. So that was a red flag for me, like right away. The other thing is that was so shocking to me is that he agreed to take a polygraph, you know, when he knew he was so guilty. And when he failed the polygraph, he had the courage, I will say courage, because I mean, to tell the investigators and the detectives that he was innocent, that he did not lie. I mean, he still was going to keep lying into the end if he wouldn't had that moment of confession with his father. He would have just continued to lie into the would have discovered it because he was so nervous. And every interview and every video that you saw, and no emotion. I mean, from the moment he showed out the first time, her friend was more emotional and stressed out about her disappearance than he was. So it was obvious that he was guilty at charge. So yeah, it's shocking, and I get you, Adrian, that you can hold your tears back. I can even like hurt my dog, much less my kids.
And, Mariana, I want to go back to you, commenting on his reaction in that video when she announced it and the way he looked and his facial expression and everything. It was almost like, oh crap, now what? It wasn't like a sincere, oh my goodness, I'm excited. We're having another baby. Blah. It was more like, oh crap, now what?
You think, Debbie, you had mentioned narcissism, and I'm going to throw this out here. One is so narcissistic that he believed he could get away with it. Because when you think about it, there's a drive involved, right? And so he's driving these girls and they're alive with their mother in the car who is not. Is that narcissistic behavior? And is it narcissism when I hear these stories of a mother or father killing their children? Are they narcissistic because they believe, well, this is my flesh and blood. I gave birth to this child. This child is here only on earth because of me. And so I can do whatever I want. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. Whoever would like to take that.
Yes, I mean, you hit the nail in the head with that one. Remember, this was a guy that was quiet, right? The neighbor said, "This is a quiet guy. He doesn't talk a lot." So that's why the neighbor said he was very nervous because he would just couldn't stop talking. So this was the guy that probably felt empowered when he killed his wife, and he's like, "Oh, look at me," in his sick mind. And now I'm gonna kill these little girls because they belong to me too. Yeah, that is definitely a narcissist. And someone that doesn't give a cent about someone's life and in their own blood. So yeah, they be afraid when people are I mean, I shouldn't say this, but yeah, I'm always very suspicious of people that are too quiet and don't show really who they truly are. And this is an example of someone like that, like this guy.
I always think of murder as that there's, either money problems, there's either sexual problems, there's a relationship taking place behind the scenes, cheating, or some pretty strong things that could make someone snap. But Joseph, was the relationship that he had with this other female, was that something that was, like, going strong? Like, were they planning on, like, running off together, into the deep blue sea? Or can you just go back to share that information?
Sure, Adrian. Yeah. It's my understanding that this was a relatively new relationship. They didn't know each other that long. I think it was only a couple months. So, no, it's not like this was a years long affair and they were going to run off together. The mistress didn't even know him that well. So, the motive is crazy to me. And I'll just say the scariest part about this case to me is there really weren't that many red flags. Yes, a cheating husband or a cheating spouse is a red flag that there's an issue going on in the marriage and there's probably a moral issue going on with the cheating spouse. But there's a lot of people that cheat, and most of those people don't commit murder. And typically, in situations where partners murder their spouses, there's usually more signs: domestic abuse, emotional abuse. There's usually a lot more there in retrospect. And this one, there really wasn't. If you look at her social media posts, he plays the part of a perfect, loving father to the T, almost perfectly. So to me, it's just so chilling because I don't know what anyone could have really done to see this coming.
I was just going to speak to narcissism because when it comes to a narcissistic person, you will see them on the outside as this wonderful person, everything looks perfect, and the other party involved try to paint this perfect picture and everything is wonderful when behind the scenes it's really not. And narcissists tend to push the blame on everybody else and everybody else's fault and they're the shining star and everything. But I've seen it over and over again in narcissistic behavior where to the world they look like this wonderful person, but behind the closed doors, you don't really know how they are. And the person that they're living with or in the relationship with tries to hide it and make like the whole world is wonderful. So it makes me wonder, she put out to the world and think about social media in general. Most people always want to put out the highlights of what their life is like and what's going on and how everything's rosy and perfect. They're not going to show on the social media the hard times and the fighting and the mental abuse that could take place. So I think that going to her social media, yeah, she looked like she had a perfect life, but what was really going on behind the closed doors, we'll never know.
I just want to say, well, I want to just speak to what Joseph said. Thank you very much, Debbie. So, you know, the fact that it wasn't a long relationship with this new person could actually be the issue because often if you have a long relationship, that could become as tiring as the wife that you have. But when you start a new relationship and how exciting it is and how sexy it is. Shannon was pregnant. This woman isn't pregnant. They're able to do things together. I actually think that that's even worse sometimes because he's developing a relationship. So he wanted something exciting and something fresh. And so that absolutely could be really the issue, right? Like, even if it didn't go anyplace, even if he didn't really know her, if she winked at him and paid a little attention or said, I'll go on a date with you, or, when's your wife away again? Anything like that, I could see could possibly have him believing, oh, there's something great on the other side. And yes, I could start fresh. Who else would like to share their thoughts? Amanda.
Yeah, I wanted to share some new findings that have become pretty popular while I was digging the internet on this case. I was reading some Reddit threads, looking at TikToks where people have actually had like full podcast episodes about this trial. So now this is all alleged because the mistress was not charged with anything, to my knowledge, but there were a few things that were a little odd and actually raised a red flag when I was researching this case. One being that her cell phone, the mistress's cell phone, actually pinged at the Frederick Tower, which I believe was their township. They lived in the township of Frederick. Her phone pinged there the morning of the murders at 6:16 a.m. I also read that in the discovery files, there was an unidentified device that connected to the Wi Fi the morning of the murders in the Watts residence. So there's a lot of speculation that she was aware and or involved to some degree with this atrocity. My thought process, again, this is alleged, was that she was there. Shanann came home early from her work, caught them, and that's what set everything off. That's just my theory. But I find it to be a little odd that her cell phone pinged in the tower of the township that they lived in. And there was again an unidentified device connected to the Wi-Fi the same morning of the murders. So I don't know if anybody else researched that or came up with that, but there's a lot out there about Nicole being involved to some extent, allegedly.
Everything you said, unfortunately, it's like, who knows? But the speculation, you're really right. The amount of like Facebook groups supporting Shannon and talking about Chris Watts and how angry people were feeling. But you're right. I didn't go down the rabbit hole like you did, and I really appreciate that you did do that, whether it's real or not. So, Joseph, did you want to say anything regarding Amanda's comments?
Sure, Amanda. Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, anytime you have a high profile case like this, you're going to have people having their own theories and hypothesis. And yeah, there are Reddit threads and rabbit holes that you can go down. I can't speak to that theory that the mistress was involved. All I know is that the police did not suspect her and they cleared her and said that she was cooperative. So I'm taking their word for it in this case. But yeah, we really don't know exactly what happened. I know that Shannon's phone was still in the home the following morning when the police got there. But Amanda, I think you were saying that what the mistress's phone allegedly pinged in their town?
Yeah, her phone pinged and she did admit to other pings. They looked at her call log. There's a actual picture of her call log you can look up. And all the times that it pinged, she did admit to being there, except for that morning. She claimed she was not there. And that was the mistress's phone. And then also there was an unidentified device. So a device that's not normally in the Watts residence or associated with the Watts family that connected to the Watts Wi-Fi in their house the same morning of the murders. Allegedly. Okay. Now I know the call records are out there. So you can see that and you can see that her phone does ping in the Frederick Township tower the morning of at 6:16 a.m. But to me that's a little fishy Is it something that they glossed over that may come up? I don't know. I don't know, but I just want to bring it to the table. This has been a case for me that diving into the details is extremely heart-wrenching, and I was crying right there with you, Adrian. I just don't understand how anybody in their right mind could do something so horrible. Is he a sociopath? Is he a psychopath? I mean, I would have to say to some extent, yes, because I don't think anybody in their right mind could do something so evil, no matter what the reason. So this has always been a case that has just been gut wrenching for me, especially as a mother.
I always think that when I think of a sociopath, I think someone without empathy. And you have to have 0 empathy to be able to do this. But I wanted to bring up another point, and I have another question for Joseph. So, Joseph, if you think about it, it kind of went fast, right? I mean, he showed them the children, he admitted his guilt. At that point, would the police have said, you know what? You know what? We got the guy. He admitted the guilt. He showed us where the children were and his wife. You know what? Let's just move on. And maybe, there wasn't a need to really investigate some of these other things that people are saying.
Adrian, I know that we do cover a lot of true crime cases, and in some of those cases, the police do botch the investigation. But I think the heinousness of this crime, where you have children being murdered and a pregnant wife being murdered, I personally think that if the police had any inkling that the mistress was involved, I would think that they would follow that up. Because had they had evidence that she was actually involved in this case, I would think that they would be afraid that she would then do something to other families. So that for me is why I don't take a lot of stock in the theory that she was involved. But again, we don't know. We don't know exactly what happened.
So the next question really is, they declared bankruptcy in 2015, but that was 3 years before, right? So 3 years, a lot could happen. And I know plenty couples that have declared bankruptcy and are moving on and they have a beautiful life and there's no murder happening in their home. So do you guys think that that could have been a subtle warning sign, their financials?
So Adrian, I think that financial issues, I think, are one of the number one reasons why people separate or get divorced. So I can imagine that probably could have factored in if they were under financial strain. But again, I will never understand these men who kill their wives. And sometimes it's women killing their husbands, but it's usually men committing these types of murders. And I will never understand it. Why don't you just get a divorce? Why don't you just get a divorce? You're having financial problems, figure it out. This this pattern of men killing their spouses and occasionally their families, I will never understand it. There is always another way out of a bad situation. You do not have to physically harm another person.
But what if in somewhere down deep, you actually, in your narcissistic, lack of empathy way, think that if I can't have you, nobody can have you. And if I can't raise you, nobody's going to raise you. And I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but sometimes I think that's actually what happens. It's no, no matter how much I don't love you, I still want to. I still want to harm you. I still want to just get back at you for something. So that's how I kind of say in my mind, like what I think.
Absolutely, Adrian. And you could tell just by some of the videos and the posts that they portrayed in the documentary, you could tell that she really loved her husband and she definitely loved her kids. And that's part of what makes it just even more unconscionable is she was in love with this man and she was trying to repair their marriage. She knew something was off. She knew he was distant, but she still loved him. And he murdered her and their kids in this just cold, brutal manner, which is the exact opposite of love.
Is just terrible and sad. But what makes it even more crazier, more psychotic is when one of his daughters is asking him, "Are you going to do that to me also?" And he continued forward to take her life as well. Like There's something totally off with the guy. So, yeah, like, that just makes it extra, extra disgusting and cringeworthy and psychotic on his end, really terribly. How can you do that? Like, your daughter's pleading for her life. Like, how you can do that to me and he still does it? Like, there's something totally off with him.
So, Mary Kim, isn't it telling that he shared that with us? Like, the police didn't need to know that detail. That was a detail he could have taken to his deathbed. That to me is the number one proof that this guy had zero empathy. I will say kudos to the friend. I hope for all of us that each of us have such a beautiful, strong hearted friend that he would immediately call the police, ask for a well check. So I always thought that that was a beautiful thing. And it's a reminder for all of us to keep an eye on our friends. And if you have any suspicion of a friend going through something, to make sure that you are calling them up, that you find out when they are coming home and what they're doing next. Any other thoughts?
Absolutely, Adrian. And while that friend wasn't able to save Shannon's life, she definitely got the wheels of justice turning very quickly. The police were at the house before he even came home from work that day. And while he did leave a lot of evidence behind, it's possible that if people didn't notice that she was missing for a couple of days, he could have cleaned up the crime scene. He could have moved the bodies. It's possible he could have gotten away with this had the friend not alerted the police and been so intense about asking where she was. So the one lesson that I'm taking away from this case for sure is check on your friends, check on your family, check in with people because we never really know what's going on behind closed doors. So with that, that is all for tonight's deep dive into the Watts family murders. This case has been a truly heartbreaking reminder that unspeakable violence can hide behind the facade of an ordinary American family. We've explored the timeline of events from Shannon's hopeful pregnancy announcement to the harrowing investigation and Chris Watts' ultimate confession. At its heart, we remember Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and baby Nico, 4 innocent lives stolen far too soon. While nothing can bring them back, justice was served in a court of law, and Chris Watts will spend the rest of his life in prison. Thank you for joining us in Debate the News True Crime Edition. I'm Joseph Lobosco.
I'm Adrienne Barker, but before I go, I want to say a quick thank you to Mariana, Mary Kim, Debbie, and Amanda for speaking up and sharing your thoughts with us. We really appreciate that. Again, we're live on Chatter Social. Download the app in your app store. You'll see it, little blue bubbles that'll say Chatter Social. If you want to go to the website, it's chattersocial.io. And we look forward to seeing you in the room next time so we can talk. Stay curious, my friends. Stay informed. And as always, stay safe. Good night, everyone.